Ready, Claudia, whenever you are.
Excellent. So thank you everyone for coming today and this beautiful, the warm day. We have today an excellent speaker that is Maíra Souza. She comes from Brazil. I hosted her for only 3 weeks. I wish it could stay longer, unfortunately, but she can't do that. And she right now works with Embrapa, which is the institution dedicated to research and agriculture in Brazil. So it's one of the largest research institutions and agricultural issues in Brazil. So Maíra is going to present us the research that she just finished in her PhD program, and it's about collaborative governance and the front line, explaining public performance in Brazil's agricultural research. Thank you, Maíra, for joining us.
Thank you. So glad. Well, thank you everybody for being here. It's a pleasure. I'm very glad. I will take advantage of this moment because as I am leaving tomorrow, fortunately it was a short period here, I want to let all of you know how grateful I am and how rich was this period. I could have in contact with brilliant scholars discussing their research from different fields and with different perspectives. So it was very rich. And also I could be in touch with Ostrom's thoughts, theory, framework in a way that I can see that definitely it can be useful in my future research as a researcher at Embrapa, as well as in my job. So I'm going to present to you part of my PhD research, which I defended last year. So the title is Collaborative Governance of the Frontline, Explaining Public Performance in Brazilian Agricultural Research. I will follow a traditional framework for this kind of presentations, right? So I'm going to give to you an idea of the context, the research question, why does it matter, the theoretical research model, methods, results, limitations, and conclusions. So I work, can I stay? I never really prepared. Instead of looking to, okay, so I work in the Brazilian Agricultural Research Corporation since 2007. I am one of these more than 2,000 researchers that work there. We are 9% of us has PhD. We used to be an organization with 10,000 of employees, but nowadays we are more than 7,000. Brazilian Agricultural Research Corporation, Embrapa, is the leading body of public research, agricultural research in Brazil. We are subordinated to the Ministry of Agriculture, and we were founded in 1973 during the dictatorial government in Brazil. So that time we were suffering from food insecurity. And as a strategy, the government decided to found this organization to put together the scientists that we had at that time. We were not too many, but we spread them for all over the world to study and come back and make this beautiful and wonderful organization. So since then, Embrapa is not a public policy, is not an organization, a public policy, is not a public organization that build public policy makers. Embrapa is not a public policy maker organization. We support and we deliver the public policies regarding topics such as tropical agriculture, global food security, climate change adaptation, and so on. So comparing our number of employees with the total number of public services, civil service that we have in Brazil, in the federal level of Brazil, we are less than 1% of the total number of the federal civil servants that we have in Brazil. So these 2,000 and something researchers, they are working in more than 1,000 of ongoing R&D projects. From this total, our projects have been leading by 650 frontline leaders. I am calling them as frontline leaders here. So they are leading these projects. At the same time, they are part of the teams that are in these projects. Also, they have the support from people from administration, operations, that are forming this rich group of researchers. So considering the total number of leaders that we have in this organization, when we look into these numbers, we will see that 80% of the leaders that we have, they are in the frontline levels of the organization. So they, quantitatively speaking, they represent a lot. Embrapa, there is another thing. It is an organization with 43 research centers, and they are spread for all over the country. So we have centers in countryside of Brazil, developing different research depending on the biome where they are. So we have been doing it for the last more than 50 years, and now we can with proud say that Brazil is the largest exporter for several different commodities, such as soybeans, orange juice, coffee, beef, chicken, and most of these results exist because of this organization. So I have been wondering and working with these teams and looking how our challenges have been changing and pushing us to be outside our organization and collaborate more. So the main research question of this study was, how do frontline leaders fosters collaboration and innovation in polycentric context, and how does it improve public performance? This is very interesting because Embrapa, although it is a very specific organization with high level of education people, it also shares similarities with other traditional public organizations. For instance, we are spread for all over the country, like our federalism way of government. We are under the same laws as always, all public organizations that we have. We suffer from scarcity of resources as other public organizations as well. And also we are inside an inter-organizational arena where we can't deliver our results, which are technologies, social innovation, new seeds. We can't do it by ourselves. We need to be acting and making decisions together with several of other actors, such as universities, fundraising institutions, private organizations, public organizations, and so on. So from the literature, right? Why does it matter? So why does collaborative governance matter? As I mentioned, we are in a polycentric governance system. So the institution Embrapa is there in that system. And together with the institution, we have the leaders. We have our project leaders. So they are sharing authority and resources in a shared power arena, where they have to deal with leaders in the same levels as they. So sometimes the leaders are dealing with their peers, sometimes they are dealing with professors in the universities, mayors in the countryside, in the small cities that we have, and different kinds of stakeholders. But from the existing literature, what we see is that in terms of integrative public leadership, or sometimes we can call it collaborative leadership or network leadership, scholars use it interchangeably, we see that they are theorizing and studying the upper echelon leaders. Few studies dedicated this topic to the lower level of leadership in the organizations. So I proposed to turn the lens and look into this phenomenon from the perspective of those that are at the front, delivering the public policies. So I introduced this concept, integrative public leadership for frontlines, as an approach to developing the internal and external collaboration through two groups of behaviors. The first one is system thinking, the capacity to see the big picture, the capacity to connect actors to see who are involved, and then cross the boundaries of their organizations and their own teams. So these two main groups of behaviors define the collaborative leadership for frontlines. So it's not enough anymore to stay seated in your seat, developing your research in your laboratory with your teams. It's not enough anymore to overcome our challenges. It's necessary to get out of your seat, articulate with other internal departments, procurement, HR, all of these, but also it's necessary to cross the boundaries of the organization and articulate with several of actors and stakeholders. All of these should meet the challenges of their own teams. So from a theoretical perspective, we definitely need to move beyond the operational leadership investigation, because we need to see the perspectives of the leaders that are in the lowest levels of the public organizations. Another thing is that my thesis was developed into 3 main studies. I'm going to show to you the third one, because it was the study where I tested my theoretical model. But in the second study, I couldn't find, until as I know from the literature, that we would have developed it or described these behaviors before. When I looked into the literature, I couldn't find a scale or a list of behaviors describing what kind of collaboration these leaders at this level are doing. So I had to develop a new scale. I made a lot of interviews describing their behaviors. Then I used psychometrics techniques. We can talk about it later. And then I finally came up with a scale with evidence of validity that I tested in different samples before. Then we need to move beyond leader-centered paradigms. Okay, the traditional leadership theories, they are still relevant. We have a lot of knowledge about how it influences the results and other behaviors. But this kind of traditional leadership where we have the formal leader, the subordinates here, and a hierarchy between them, we need to move beyond it, because leadership and the challenges that civil servants have been facing requires more and more a relational perspective. See leadership as a collective action. People are working in shared power arenas. So we need to look into this phenomenon from a more horizontal perspective. And from a practical perspective, in the case of the federal level of Brazil, the frontline leaders represent 80% of all leaders at the federal level. At Embrapa, we have the same number, 80%. So why not think that maybe this same partner exists in other democracies, in other countries, or in other public organizations as well. Besides that, these people, they need to maintain a broad perspective on everyday problems, because their problems have been becoming more complex, and they have been pushed to deliver more. So they need to be able to see the big picture and identify and break institutional barriers to reach their challenges. And at the end, they are the people that are translating the public policies into actions. They are those that are putting their hands on and making things happen. So to do this, they need to articulate collective actions, building bridges. This was the theoretical research and investigation, the first part of it. My main thesis was that collaborative leadership behaviors are associated with leader and team performance, and its relationship, as we know that leadership is a context-dependent variable. So this relationship also will be moderated by top management support, in a way that the stronger the support the leader receives, the stronger would be the relationship between these two variables. But moving on, I also theorized that this group of collective behaviors not only directly influence team performance, but also job autonomy and resource availability mediates this relationship. Those could be the mechanisms through integrative public leadership affects team performance. And why job autonomy? Consider that when I am talking about integrative public leadership, we have 2 cornerstones. We have the capacity to see the big picture, to have this drawn view and connect actors, and also the capacity to cross the boundaries of within the organization and outside the organization. When a leader does it, he or she sees the relevance of giving to their teams autonomy to make decisions, to define how to do, when to do their jobs. And when they do it, job autonomy is a very well-known variable in the field of psychology. And when they do it, they fosters the team members a kind of intrinsic motivation that strengthens their feelings of responsibility. So when we give autonomy to our students, to our subordinates, or to our peers that are working with us, we send a message that we trust them. We trust them and you give responsibility. And when we do it, they will be more encouraged to engage in extra role behaviors that at the end would also affect team performance. And regarding resource availability, when we see leaders being able to cross boundaries, articulate with different and several actors, these leaders will have more capacity to access different kinds of resources, not only financial resources, but also expertise, infrastructure, for example, sharing laboratories with other institutions or even private institutions. And it also would impact on team performance. So I conducted a study, I collected the data at Embrapa, as I said to you, but also I decided to compare the results with the Agricultural Ministry. As I had the opportunity to collect data in this traditional public organization, I decided to have these two main samples. Unfortunately, in the Agricultural Ministry, I was not on the control of the data collection, so I had to count on the help of HR. So I only could collect data from the subordinates of the leaders, from their perceptions. But at Embrapa, as I was controlling the data collection, I could collect data from the team members. I am calling them subordinates, although we know that there is no formal subordination. And I also collected data from the leaders. I collected the data from the organization as well, the objective indicators of performance. So as you can see here, we are not young anymore. We are scientists, we are researchers, so we are most of us more than 40 years, a similar partner in the Agricultural Ministry as well. We have a lot of masters and PhD. Also in the ministry, almost 40%. So we are high level. We have high level of education, and also we have been working in the public service sector for a long time. It's a characteristic of characteristics of Brazil, right? So, as I said, in the Ministry of Agriculture, I collect data using online surveys, and I was not in the control. HR helped me. But at Embrapa, I use mixed methods. So I first conducted some interviews to understand the behaviors of these leaders. Then in a first wave, I collected the data adopting surveys, online surveys, from the frontline leaders about their own perceptions of their integrative public leadership and the support that they receive from the top. Then, in a second moment, I collected the data from the team members' perceptions, asking them about their leader performance, the team performance, the collaborative behaviors of their leaders, the autonomy that they have, the resources that they have, and also the top management support. And at the end, I collected data from the administrative data, the objective hard indicators, about the leader performance. And at the end, to triangulate all of this and try to understand better what the numbers were showing to me, I conduct some interviews based on the indications of headquarters. So people from the headquarters told me, these, they are the best leaders that we have. So go there and interview them. I am not going to the details of all the scales that I use, but it will be a pleasure to talk to you later if you want. But to collect the dependent variables, which were leader and team performance, the leader performance was measured from all of them. I used scales with validity of evidence. This one was a single item asking to them, the performance of the leader in promoting the success of your team is very bad, regular. Then from the objective outcomes, what I did was I had the number of ongoing projects led by leaders in a period of 10 years. So I knew all the projects that they had led. I also, which means, just to let you know, because it's similar to universities, Embrapa has several calls for the research projects. So the leader has to write a proposal together with their team. They have to form a team before. They have to articulate, and then they submit the proposal to a call. If it was accepted, it means that, well done. They can get some funds and they can go on and develop their researches. So the number of projects led is something that shows, it's a good indicator that the leader is a good leader, because there are a lot of leaders that can't have a submission approved. The amount of external funding security as well, how much money they bring to the organization, and the number of publication, either as an author or a co-author. The team perception, I use these existing scales. I tested all of them with my sample as well, all of them with good psychometric measures. This was the scale that I told you that I developed. So it was composed by 17 items. They are grouped into 3 different factors. So the factor 1 was about integrative thinking, just to give you an idea of the items. So people were saying their perceptions about, for example, my leader takes a broad view of our problems in the context of future challenges, or my leader assesses how our problems affect our organizational challenges. Regarding external boundary spanning, for instance, my leader established connections with people in other organizations to access relevant information. Regarding internal boundary spanning, my leader establishes effective working relationships between people from different departments and units in our organization. So some few examples for you. There are the mediators, the moderators, all of them with scales with validity of evidence, 3 items for job autonomy, 3 items for resource availability, and 2 items for top management support, okay? So it was a multi-source study, a cross-sectional study, and I conducted several of data analysis. Content analysis for quality for the interviews, descriptive statistics, exploratory, confirmatory factor analysis, different regressions depending on the source of information that I used. So this is the main table of the thesis, because it was when I tested the first hypothesis, which was this group of behaviors would influence leader and team performance. This is part of the main table, but just to let you know that regarding team performance, I could see that IPLF has a positive and significant effect regardless the source of information. So to reduce common method bias, I decided to, okay, let's test from the subordinates' perceptions. Let's test from the leader's perception. And then let's try to reduce the bias, and let's combine different perceptions. When I did it, I used team members' perceptions about their leaders' collaboration, and I crossed it with the leaders' perceptions of their own performance. And when I did it, the results is still relevant, positive, and significant, although I lost the power effect, but it was totally expected. And in the Ministry of Agriculture, the same result. Regarding the leader performance per se, I could test it using objective measures. So from that 3 indicators that I told you, I compound a unique index based on these scores, and I could test it if IPLF would influence the objective results. Also from the subordinates perceptions, I found similar results, and in the Ministry of Agriculture, the same. So summarizing that main result, we can see that the higher the level of IPLF, the greater will be team and leader performance based on their perceptions. The greater will be the number of projects led by these leaders, the amount of money resource that they mobilize, and also the number of publications. Regarding the other hypothesis, the mediation effect here, I explained to you the mechanism, how it works. And also I could found positive and relevant significant effects. So the more the leader see the big picture, the more the leader cross the boundaries, the more he will give job autonomy to their team members, and it will influence team performance. The same with resources. The more they have these collaboration behaviors, the more resources they will be bring to the team, more not only funding, but experts, infrastructure, and it will positively influence on team performance. So regarding the moderation test, I couldn't support that top management support moderates the relationship between the two variables. And it was very interesting because during the interviews, I could investigate it more. And for just to give you an idea, when I was trying to understand why it doesn't matter, top management support is not relevant, some leaders told me, you see, it's no matter in practice, because even if I have the support, even if I don't have the support from the top management, I will collaborate, no matter if I have or not have the support, because it's my characteristics. So I will do collaborate with or without my top management support. But I decided to split the sample in two. So I decided to compare the means of IPLF when I have high levels of top management support perceptions and low levels of top management support perceptions. And then I had these two groups, the groups that thinks that they have top management support, and groups that seems that they don't have, they have but not too much. And when I see the measures were significant and statistically different, although pretty close, they were different. So it means that IPLF level is greater in context of high top management support. Finally, I conduct some post hoc analysis just to investigate. So what else? My objective was to show that IPLF matters. Matters for what? Matters because it impacts on performance. But maybe it matters for other results as well. Maybe it impacts on other results. So as I could measure the perception about innovative work behavior, I also could see that it positively influences the innovative behavior amongst the team members. So I am almost finishing. And from the interviews, I brought some quotations for you just to show how these results also are seen by the people that are at the front. So this, regarding integrative view, this project leader said, I look at least a decade ahead. The research has to make sense. I bring socioeconomists into the team. I need to talk to people all over the world looking for international research. When we integrate different expertises and different focuses, we end up finding more holistic results. Regarding resource availability, look how interesting. This leader said, working with a team of 20 or 30 people, you end up having not just one pair of eyes, but dozens of eyes. I don't have the capacity to keep an eye on every opportunity that passes by. And then someone on my team comes up and says, did you see that? And before you know it, that thing turns into a source of funding that you had no idea it could ever generate. About autonomy, you end up taking on several commitments. You also have to give autonomy, right? Because you can't coordinate everything at the same time. That frees you up a bit so you can, take on more actions. And finally, regarding boundary spanning, this leader said, so once you are aware of that, then you build a more cohesive collaboration. To truly achieve innovation, I don't think we should stay in our silos. External collaboration is important to drive innovation. And the conclusions, oh, well, we brought to the literature and to the field a scale describing the behaviors that these leaders have, and they are grouped into three factors: integrative thinking, external boundary spanning, and internal boundary spanning. Literature on frontline leaders and performance, because we could show that at the frontline level, there is a relevance regarding collaborative behaviors and performance and innovation. Also, about the mechanisms. So we can see that these kind of leaders, they offer job autonomy and resources, and it's relevant for their results. Regarding collaborative behaviors, it can increase collaborative capacity of the leaders, of that 80% of the leaders that we have. So how this number represent? At the end, from practical perspective, HR perspective, these results also can contribute to leadership development actions that the organizations do, and also other influence or other practices from emphasizing how collaboration or rewarding collaboration among the employees. As always, this research has several limitations as well. It was a cross-sectional study. It was developed only in Brazil. We didn't test it in different cultural contexts. We can do it. I think this is opening up a research avenue, in fact. So we are in the beginning of this journey, I would say. We can use comparative research. We maybe can try different data collection methods using time-lagged, maybe. And it didn't consider the external actors in the action arena of the research leaders, because I decided to study the leaders' behavior. And each project from that thousands of projects, they are inside different arenas, so with different external actors. So I couldn't have these perceptions. And my main objective was to show that collaborative leadership at the front lines matter. So it matters and it brings consequences. But for future studies, we should investigate as well why some leaders collaborate more than others, for instance. Why do we have a few groups of leaders collaborating and exercising these collaborative behaviors and others don't? So which individual characteristics forces collaboration leadership, for instance? Could it be traits, extroversion, introversion characteristics, maybe previous experience that they had? From the interviews, some ideas came up to me, because some of them told me about the first leader that they have, how relevant. Usually it was a professor, because usually they were working in a PhD research with that researcher, and how this person worked as a role model to them. So previous experience, social capital, those that have more social capital can be more collaborative, work more collaboratively. So this is for future research. I think, yes.
So Maíra, so we have 25 minutes for the Q&A. Would you like to start?
Well, we want to start with the grad student or no? Are there any grad students that would want to have a question first?
That will motivate them to talk.
Yes, okay, that's fine. I will try to act as a motivator. This is really, really interesting and an impressive amount of work. I'm curious, I think there's been a fair amount of research on sort of when teams are effective at solving problems, particularly in like the business and management space. And I'm sure you're familiar with that. But one thing that kind of comes to mind, particularly with this question of when and whether leaders are collaborative in their leadership style and how effective it is, seems like it would matter a whole or be entirely significantly contingent on some measure of diversity in the team, right? So we know, for example, that diverse teams, and I don't mean necessarily racial or socioeconomic, I mean people that think differently from each other, whether that comes from their identity or their experience or something else, right? actually makes that team more effective at solving hard problems. I would think that both the level of or degree of kind of difference in perspective, experience, background, totally separate question of how you would measure this, right? Would shape both team effectiveness and also whether a leader is willing or interested in being collaborative with them, right? In actually different directions, right? They may be more effective if they're diversely working together because they can solve harder problems, but it may make a leader find it more difficult to work collaboratively if they see lots of differences with respect to themselves. So I'm just curious if that's a question of interest, if it's sort of factored in the way you were thinking about either team success or leadership collaboration. And if not, if it's a potential area of interest moving.
Thank you for your question, because I have been wondering about something like that. I didn't investigate this characteristic of the teams, but I have been reading that in the making decision and solving problem sections that teams usually do, if they are more diverse in terms of their profile of solving problems, they usually are more innovative. But when they are more diverse, they are less satisfied with their peers. And so, as you were talking about, maybe it would be difficult to the leader to deal with this type of diversity, but on the other side, it could bring more innovative results. When we are in a team working with people with similar profiles as us, when we are making decisions or solving problems, we tend to be more satisfied, because you just think like me. You don't need to spend time in discussions because everybody in the same mood. But usually these kind of teams don't deliver innovative results. So I totally agree with this idea, and I would like to investigate it more in our teams, because it's from private studies, private organizational studies. But I totally agree. There are much more mechanisms happening.
There's only so many.
Yes.
It just made me think of.
Thank you.
Any other question?
Maíra, what a research design. It was so good to see. And I'm working a project that there's a PhD student that are measuring the leadership and the rule breaking in community-based management. So all the index I understood. But I want to ask you, because I saw that you also collect data about gender, right? Like how many were female, how many male, and also the age of them, more than the majority is more than 40 years old. So those characters influence. Do you have this data from of females or age? How does it influence the collaborative work?
Wonderful question, Adriana. I didn't put the whole table because you couldn't see the numbers, but I worked with these variables as control variables, and I didn't find any influence regarding gender, regarding age, no influence. And I found a small effect related to the time, the experience, tenure, the time in the organization. So those that have more time working at Embrapa, they are tend to be the leaders that are more collaborative, maybe because of maturity, I don't know, or they were able to make more contacts during their profession. So thank you.
Gustavo?
I like this this line of research. So my first question is there any way to just kill a potential story that goes in the following direction? It's kind of just pure selection, no? You have people with skills and people with no skills. People with skills attract more collaborations. People with low skills do not attract collaboration. So it's not about their styles, it's about their skills, no? So, but I think probably given you have the ability to potentially control for this story, no? It's like maybe you can control for previous performance, and then, with groups that have more or less the same performance, but then again, so ideally what we would like to see is some kind of exogenous allocation of leadership style and see what happens, but that's of course impossible. No? So again, I'm not want to push in that direction because I think it would be, almost impossible to get it. But at the very least, start, healing those other potential stories and start saying, well, this looks like it's coming through the approach to leadership and not something else. Okay. And then the second thing, which is more institutionally connected, I really like that the end of the presentation, we started talking about, well, now I have to ask the political economy question is like, why some leaders, so if this is so good, why they are not transitioning to this system? I think from that perspective, that sounds like a very, very interesting question. But if there are not some kind of institutional incentives that are pushing you in one direction or the other, or it might be that within the organization, people have different career paths. Now it's like maybe somebody wants to have a career as a politician, for example, and then again, what's the point of doing this? Or the other way around, maybe I want to do this. Okay? So that's maybe start connecting with the institutional incentives. And then probably there is a literature that I don't know very well, but probably someone in the room can help is there's an extended literature on bureaucracies in polyscience that I think there you could start making some connections. What kind of incentives you have in these bureaucracies. And then the final thing, it's maybe not for this project, but like a bigger type of questions, like maybe this is suggesting that we may think very radically different institutional arrangements in which, well, people in this organization start, instead of working more or less like in academic department, they have to work for those people. So essentially, you subsidize organizations that are doing something rather than having a more centralized organization and then relying on some leaders that they are. So the leaders becomes the employees of people in the front lines rather than relying on leaders with goodwill or good skills to be serving those in the front line, no? So, but again, that's probably kind of too radical to think in that perspective.
Your points are pretty interesting because now that I am back to my organization and presenting these results to them, we are trying to figure out organizational actions and programs that can really incentive them to have this kind of approach, for example. So we are dealing with now. I confess that I finished this journey of my PhD with much more questions than answers because after figuring out all of these results now, so what we can do to foster this collaboration, or more than this, how some of them are so react so different from the others. There are something very interesting because at one moment you are leading a project, but at the same time you are member of other projects that your colleagues, your peers are leading. So there is this colleague relationship, but also we need to have some kind of leadership approach at some moment. So all of these are wonderful questions about their previous experience, the network they have been developing. I had some other analysis, for example, it was one of my questions that is not here, but for instance, those that speak English, they lead more projects and they bring more resources, probably because they can connect to international, they can have international connections. And when we look into the history of the organization, those leaders are the leaders from the beginning of the organization, because when we were founded, we put them in the world to study in the best universities that exist at that time in the world. Because in Brazil, in the 70s, we didn't have PhD courses or master's courses. So we let them, we push them to the world. And then these are our senior leaders. And they also seem to be the more collaborative leaders. The younger leaders, researchers that are coming, they don't have these skills. So we have now different challenges in terms of HR development, definitely. And we now are trying to figure out how we can do in practice based on these results to improve collaboration. Thank you.
Mike?
Yeah, this is fascinating work, and I've always thought that leadership was very important, but it's really hard to get a handle on sort of what makes a good leader in different contexts. And clearly, you've been dealing with some of those issues. But one of the phrases I've always found useful in the leadership literature is something called distributed leadership. That there are some organizations that are organizationally set up to encourage leaders to encourage other leaders to act rather than more hierarchical sort of organizations where it really all it comes to that. And it would seem to me that each of your frontline actors here, frontline officials, are coming out of some organizational training in some sense, in different disciplines or different types of. And the more that those people are all sort of coming out of organizations with a more distributed leadership kind of approach would make it easier sort of for this to work. And yet, if you have some more hierarchical organizations mixed in there, it's going to be a more complicated sort of time to get a match. So that would suggest you start looking at the organizational factors of where these people are coming from. So how much did you deal that in that? Because I know in the collaborative governance literature, there's a lot of concern about the different institutional logics that each of these collaborators have sort of grown up within, and how if they have very different ways of looking at how to do things, it's more difficult to get them to work together. So how does that sort of fit in to look at you may have actually gotten to that a little bit about that some of your senior leaders were trained in that sort of, so.
I think this is the way to answer to comment your question. Definitely. Yes, I totally agree. We should look into it, but when we look into the characteristics of our sample, as I showed to you, we have been working in the public sector for a long period. So most of the researchers, it's interesting, either they come from the universities in the 70s, or they are entering the organization right now. Because to work to Brazilian public sector, you have to be approved in a national exam. And these national exams, they don't occur frequently. And because of it, we have people that have been working for a long time. And in my organization at Embrapa, it was the same. The last national exam that you had occurs 15 years ago. So now, last year, we had a new exam. And now we are receiving new researchers, new employees with previous experience. We don't know their history, but they are being socialized right now at this moment after my research with the leaders that we have there. So regardless the age shock, we need to have good examples, good models, good roles to be followed. And regarding these new researchers, it's interesting because a lot of them come from the universities, and they have just finished their PhD. So they were students until before entering the organization. So now, how they were socialized in that context of a university, possible with a hierarchy relationship with their supervisors or something like this, and how it's going to be our organizations right now. So it's something that we are already worried about, how we are going to socialize them in this matricial and horizontal ways of being led. Yes. Good. Thank you for your thoughts.
Diana?
You already answered in part one of my questions, and is how was your research received once you presented it to your participants? And you already commented on that. And my second question is also more broadly about Embrapa. If all of these researchers see that they can really be independent from the current government? Because I know that that is one of the tensions, with Embrapa. So I was thinking that yes, if the work that they do is influenced by, the discussions between food security and food sovereignty, by this paradigm that has been called agri-Bolsonarismo, or that is not at all a problem, I was curious about that.
And it's very interesting because this is a real discussion that we have all the time. I interviewed leaders that works with private sector and big farmers. And I also interviewed frontline leaders consider that is seen as a collaborative leader that work with poor communities, small growers, So I could see that regardless the field that they are acting, it's not characteristics of them. They can collaborate with the actors that are involved in that in the situation in the field where they investigate. But on the other side, as you were talking about, if they think that the Brazil's government should fund their research, or if they have to get funding from external funding rates. So this is a huge discussion that we have all the time there, and it changes every time we change our government. When we have a government more left wing that tend to offer or to fund more our research, okay, that group of researchers that believe on that, they appear. When we have a government more right wing, then the message is go outside and get funds. We are not possible to have funds. Public money for everything, no more. That definitely not. But anyway, regardless of the government, the reality is we are in a moment of scarcity of resources. So I think it's becoming to be in our minds that there is no way of developing and reaching our challenges without getting money from outside. There is no way.
Nice.
Yeah, sorry. It's hard. Thank you for your presentation. Actually, it's really interesting. Lots of work. It's actually, it's really enjoy your presentation. My think actually very theoretical and basic, just about conceptualization of your leadership call and definition. You said integrative and
Leadership.
collaborative. I think it is not the same, and I didn't see the specific. I think you are focusing on collaborative leadership, and I wanted to see the integrative thinking and integrative leadership. I think that side more important, I think, for your research. And then this is not the same, because in the beginning you said might be, maybe I misunderstood. You said almost the same. I think it's not the same.
Yeah. The first study of my thesis was the conceptualization of all of it. So we have a paper published together, Professor Claudia and I, and we were looking into the state of art, what we have: distributed leadership, shared leadership, network leadership, collaborative leadership, integrative leadership, a sort of definitions. And when we mapped these studies, we could see that scholars have been using differently, interchangeably, integrative, collaborative, and network leadership. So we can see similarities between these three concepts. But distributed leadership comes from a different subfield, and shared leadership as well. But there is a specific paper, that one of the authors discussed that integrative public leadership would be better to be used,
as I know.
yes, because it's
knowledge.
exactly than collaborative. I have been using collaborative in the presentations because it's easy to everybody to understand, because integrative maybe doesn't give the idea that but you are totally correct. I have been using integrative in the writing reports, but to the audience it's easy to use collaborative leadership, but they have been using interchangeably, although we know that there are real differences.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have several, but probably just one or two, and then we can discuss the other one. And it's something related to what Gustavo says. I work with many scholars from Brazil, and I have learned that the Brazilian organizations tend to provide a lot of incentives to researchers to publish. So I was surprised when I published an article with one scholar from FGV, Fundación Getulio Vargas, and he said, "Oh, Claudia, now I'm gonna get $15,000 because we published this article in JPARC." Said, "Really?" "Yes, we got the money from publishing." So I wonder whether your institution has incentives for every time that someone publishes in a top tier journal. In fact, I am working with you and you always look of, "Oh no, Claudia, we have to publish in top journal." You are getting money. Exactly. So, and even I am editor of a journal, and the number of publications, articles that I get from Brazil are enormous. Just they want to get published for all these incentives. So that is something. Do they get more money? Do they get visibility? Do they get reputation? Do they get promotion? It's for the future. Another thing that I would like you to consider is about timing. I didn't see anything in this analysis related to timing. And the timing in terms of what? You say, well, according, based on administrations, the incentives for organizations might be different. If it is a left or right-wing party, so they might have different incentives. But how did you assess the number of publications for teams? It was based on the project or it was based on the year? Because that is a different thing. And also, I wondered because you have 2,700 frontline leaders, and from these only 550 are leaders of these teams. It means that the percentage is only 20% of them that are active leaders. So I wonder, why is it possible? Very few of them, and I assume that many of them actually are working on several teams at the same time. So in the end, it will be only 15% of them that are having this proactive role. So that is a very, very small percentage of that. Okay. And another question is about the level of analysis, because you have two hypotheses. One is at the individual level and the other one is at the organizational level. So data needs to be sorted out in a different way because different mechanisms might work and all these kind of things. But anyway, you can answer those later on. And given that we are running out of time, I want to thank Maíra and to encourage you to stay in touch with all of us, to network with us, and probably we can do research and to promote your institution and here the Ostrom workshop. And let's wish her safe travels tomorrow.